When I was 27, my life was amazing. I was about a year into my first proper job as a lawyer in a top London law firm, and I'd been sent to Bangkok for a few months as part of my training. I loved it. I was doing the job that I'd wanted to do for my whole life, living in a 5-star hotel, meeting people from all over the world, learning about a brand new culture, eating really, really good food, and getting to travel to places that I'd wanted to see for my whole life on my time off. I felt the freest I've ever felt. Then I got hit by the 2004 tsunami. I was lucky. I survived, but I lost my leg. A few weeks later, back in London, I wished for my old life. I wanted to be a normal 27-year-old lawyer, jumping out of bed in the morning, running to the tube station, ready for a full day at work, despite all the partying I'd done the previous weekend. But my new reality was very different. I would often wake up from a long sleep, completely forget that I didn't have a lower right leg, go to jump out of bed, fall on the floor, stump first, and be in a lot of pain. In the hospital, they also gave me a wheelchair to help me to get around. But while it was useful if my friends were with me, for getting from A to B, I hated it. I wanted my freedom and my independence back, and it was incredibly heavy and difficult to maneuver. But when I looked at the alternative, which was a pair of crutches, they terrified me. I had no idea how I was going to hop up and down all the stairs that you find in any big city with them, never mind the escalators in London tube stations. I vividly remember standing on top of an escalator, looking at the stairs moving down, trying to pluck the courage up to hop on, and just having visions of all the disasters that could befall me if I got it wrong, swimming in front of my eyes. As were thousands of two-legged people, all desperate to get to work and wondering what I was doing, standing at the top of the escalator, looking a bit scared. And then I thought back to when I was 18. When I was 18, I was tipped by my school for great things, well on the way to brilliant A-level results and a great university place. Unfortunately, it all went wrong. I fell in love with a boy just at the time I was meant to be revising the hardest for my exams. So, sadly, instead of standing at the university freshers' fair the October after I finished my O-levels, I actually found myself behind the counter at the Christmas decorations department of my local department store. I was devastated. My whole life until then, I'd comforted myself when I was down with the knowledge that even though I might not be the prettiest, kind of funniest, sportiest, most popular girl at school, I was at least clever. And until then, I'd been able to get by pretty well on my brains alone without really having to do any work. But that had all come crashing down. I had fun with the boy, though. But I dealt with it. I learned what it meant to work hard for the next couple of years. I got myself a place at the university I'd wanted to go to anyway. And by the time of the tsunami, I was living my dream. And I'd learned in the process that even if things get really difficult and you don't know how to get out of them, as long as you just keep going and embracing the challenges that is brought to you, you're likely going to get to where you want to go to anyway, even if you have to do it in a bit of a roundabout way. So back to the crutches. I decided to go for it. I put the wheelchair in the attic, bought myself a relatively classy backpack to wear to work instead of all the good fake handbags I bought in Bangkok, and learned how to hop up and down on the escalators, and also learned how to hop around on one high heel. And I did it. I conquered the crutches, and it gave me my freedom and my independence back, and also reinforced to me what I'd learned when I was 18. There were also some good things about only having one leg. For example, I discovered that it was a great excuse not to do any housework, and that excuse survives till this day, as my husband will attest. Also, I realised that my socks would last me twice as long. And even when it rains, even today, I love the fact that I can only feel one wet trouser leg flapping around my ankles. Then I got my first prosthetic leg. Needless to say, I'd been incredibly excited about this before the big day came, and I'd had visions of getting the leg, slipping it on like Cinderella, running off into the sunset, doing a few marathons in the process, never to have to go back to the hospital. Of course, the reality was very different. On the day I got the leg, it wasn't really much different to any other day at that time. I hopped to the hospital on my crutches, tried the leg on, yelped in agony, took it straight back off again, hopped back home on my crutches, had a glass of wine and cried. It was incredibly painful. And I realised at that stage that my journey back to being a fully fledged two-legged person was really only at its very beginning. Even worse, I worried that it might never happen. And so I reached my low point. It happened one Saturday afternoon. My boyfriend and I had arranged to go to the pub with some of our friends. But I woke up that morning in a really, really bad mood. The hospital had given me some pills while I was there to help with my phantom nerve pain. And by that Saturday afternoon, the pills had started to give me spots. Now, having one leg was one thing. That could be hidden, kind of. Having spots was quite another. I tried to cover them up with makeup, but they were too bad. It just wasn't going to happen. They felt like these big, red, shiny beacons standing out on my face for the whole world to see. To make matters even worse, my friend insisted that I bring my wheelchair to the pub with me. She said that her house, where we were going afterwards, was too far away from the pub for me to be able to hop there on crutches. I reluctantly agreed, but I was not happy about it. So, we went to the pub, finished up, and were preparing to leave. At that stage, the anger and the resentment about what had happened to me started to rise up. Why was I the one in this wheelchair when all the people standing around me had two perfectly well-functioning legs to walk on? In fact, I'd had two pretty good legs before the tsunami had hit. They looked really good in skirts and shorts. Why could it not have happened to somebody with two bad legs? Why did I have to sit here in this wheelchair with my ugly stump standing out in front of me for the whole world to see? So, I did what any sensible British person would do and decided that I'd bring my bottle of wine with me in the wheelchair on the way back from the pub. And as I didn't have to crutch anywhere and had some hands free, I thought it would also be a great idea to light up a cigarette. So, imagine, you're walking down the street in London on a sunny Saturday afternoon, and you see a young girl sitting in a wheelchair, being wheeled by her increasingly nervous-looking boyfriend, swigging from a bottle of white wine and chain-smoking cigarettes, all while screaming at everybody she can see, asking what they're staring at. What could they have been staring at, I asked myself. Needless to say, my boyfriend pretty much ran all the way back to my friend's house to try and avoid potential arrest. In the cold light of day the following morning, I was incredibly ashamed and embarrassed that I'd let myself lose control of my emotions quite so badly. I also started to think about how lucky I'd been, once again. My boyfriend and I had been rescued from the uninhabited island that we'd been on when the tsunami hit by a speedboat, which took us back to the mainland and to the local cottage hospital there really quickly, within probably about an hour of the tsunami hitting. After that, my colleagues had flown down from Bangkok to southern Thailand to find us, and then using my health insurance, they chartered an ambulance and then a private plane to bring me back to Bangkok within a few days. I knew that had any one of those pieces of luck not come to me, I wouldn't have survived. I also kept thinking about the Thai man who'd been in the hospital bed next to me for the first few days. He was about my age, and he must have hit his head on some rocks. His injuries looked really bad, and I doubt very much he survived. But his family helped me so much. Every time I needed water, they got some water for me. And whenever my pain got too much for me, they found nurses to come and help and give me some medication, which was no mean feat in the hospital we were in, which was overrun with people. His injuries were so much worse than mine, and his family must have known that I was likely to survive and be rescued, whilst he was not. Yet they treated me with incredible kindness and compassion. And I started to question why I'd survived and been saved, when by rights I had no real reason to have been. In some fleeting moments, I even wondered whether I'd been saved because I was destined to do great things for the world, things that would be a million miles away from my day job as a commercial lawyer. But when I thought more about it in my logical mind, I realised that, of course, that wasn't the case. I'd just been lucky, and I'd had really good health insurance, well, travel insurance. So I made a choice. I decided that as I'd been given a chance to have my life back, I was going to live it as fully as I could, but also that I'd use any influence that I had along the way to try to help people who weren't as fortunate as I'd been. I also decided not to let myself be defined by my leg, and that I owed that to the man in the hospital bed next to me. I decided that I wanted to live as normal and as humble a life as I could, and that I didn't want people to pity me or even celebrate me because of what had happened to me. So, I carried on doing my day job. My boyfriend and I carried on going to the pub quite a lot. But I also signed up for a charity bike ride from Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which was somewhere that I'd booked to go a couple of weeks after the tsunami hit, but never made it to. When I signed up for the ride, I still couldn't walk well without crutches, or at all without crutches, and I didn't even know whether I could ride a bike. But I had faith from what I'd done before that I'd be able to manage it. So I went out, bought my bike, sat on the saddle, put my feet in the pedals, and took myself on my first wobbly ride around our, thankfully, quite quiet London street. And I did it, all without falling off or breaking any more legs. I was delighted. I trained for the ride by cycling to and from work every day. And I loved it. I'd get up in the morning, get on my bike, cycle down the hill and across the park by where we lived, passing lots of grey, depressed-looking tube commuters on the way. And half an hour later, I'd be racing across London Bridge with all the other cyclists. All before sliding past lots of stationary cars and buses and lorries in central London, and arriving at the office to start my day. And the best thing about it, because I couldn't bring my crutches on the back of my bike, I had to abandon them. And before I knew it, I was back walking on two legs without anything else to help me. It was liberating. And you know what? It wasn't that difficult. Once I threw the crutches away because I had to, and just gave it a go, I realised that it was much easier than I thought it was going to be. I completed the ride in December 2006, along with 20 other two-legged people, and after that spent 3 weeks backpacking around Asia on my own, visiting all the places that I'd wanted to see 2 years before but couldn't. My journey finished in Bangkok at my law firm's Christmas party. I'd come full circle, and in the process, I'd gained my freedom, my independence, and a normal life back, all on my own terms. Of course, the story didn't stop then. 6 months after the bike ride, my boyfriend and I moved to Hong Kong. We got married. I did another charity bike ride, this time across the Andes in Peru. I continued to try to challenge myself in my job, carrying on working in law firms, and then NGOs and CSR consultancies before my current job in a bank. And I've also tried my best along the way to use my influence to try to help people who are less fortunate than me. So I've partnered with NGOs, participated in CSR initiatives, and until earlier this year, I headed up the Disability Advocacy Network at my organisation. My husband and I then had 2 children and stopped going to the pub so much, you'll be pleased to hear. My leg also continues to surprise me. A few years ago, I took up yoga in the gym, continuing to push myself even further out of my comfort zone, and realising in the process that I'm even less limited than I thought I was. To Lucy's point, I think yoga has become my opera. On really good days, you'll even sometimes catch me wearing a skirt, showing my 2 legs off for everyone to see. I've also succeeded, I think, in not letting myself be defined by my leg, because there's generally a bit of shock and surprise when people who've known me for a while ask if there's something wrong with my knee, and I tell them that my knee's fine, but there's not very much underneath it. The other week, my daughter even pulled a leg off one of her dolls, saying she wanted it to be like Mummy. My life's pretty good, really. I'm a very ordinary person. I've got lots of weaknesses and self-doubts, and I get carried away with my emotions just as much, if not more, than everybody else. And I make mistakes all the time, sometimes big ones. But whenever I reach a low point in my life, I think back to how I've dealt with it in the past, and how I've done it by just embracing the challenges that I've come across and keeping on going, and how that's made me a better and stronger person as a result. And that knowledge has given me the comfort and confidence that the next time it happens, I'll be able to deal with it, even if I have to do it in a bit of a roundabout way. So please, no matter how ordinary you are, embrace your challenges, face your fears, push yourself out of your comfort zone, because you never know, you might just surprise yourself. And one last point, do make sure to get good travel insurance when you go on your next holiday.